live.
What's up, all you happy people out there? I'm so excited, so excited to join you on a very irregular time. We are having a morning stream as opposed to an evening stream. You guys get to see me bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, 5 cups of coffee in this morning. So, welcome to everybody. Come on in and join us. Doctor's got his coffee going. Soder, you got your coffee in you already?
I have whiskey and Coke.
Whiskey. It's not even noon yet.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, buddy.
It's 5 somewhere.
I'm gonna start spreading nasty rumors about you, man.
Look, I'm only drinking this early because we're doing a show this early in the day.
Well, I suppose so. It's my fault.
Yes, it's your fault. You're the reason I'm an alcoholic.
Look, you were an alcoholic when I met you, so we're gonna have to blame it on somebody else. We'll blame it on the tribe of children.
There you go.
No. Let's not blame them.
Well, you could blame me though. Well,
I can blame. Well, of course I can blame you.
Well, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for joining us. A lot going on in the COVID world. A lot of going on in our world in general. First, before we get started, I want to wish everyone a happy Mother's Day. The mothers that are in here, and the mothers that'll watch this. I want to make sure I do that now so that I don't forget. So happy Mother's Day to all of y'all. I'm not a big fan of Hallmark holidays, but I know being a mother's a great thing, and I have one, and she's pretty great. And I made a beautiful woman a mother, and she's pretty great too. And so happy Mother's Day to y'all. But let's get started, man. Let's absolutely get this going. I got a chance to read your update yesterday, good doctor, and I was kind of blown away. I'll be honest with you. I thought that you and I would agree on everything, and it turns out we don't. So surprise. So far we've agreed on most things, but there was a documentary that came out this week. Some of you may have seen it, some of you may have not, and it was called The Plandemic. So some of you may not have seen it because it has been taken down, I don't know how many hundreds or maybe even thousands of times off of YouTube for violating the community standards that YouTube has put in place. So I don't want to talk too much about it because I think that, Doc, you've got a lot to say about it, so I'll let you approach it. But let's at least start here, because I like to start on things I think we can agree with, and we can work our way away from that point. Doc, how do you feel about this documentary, first and foremost? You've watched it, correct?
I've watched part of 2 videos. One is the promotional video for the movie Plandemic. I only watched a few minutes of that because I was pretty much blown away by the over-the-top approach that it took right away. And I thought, hold on a second, I need to find out more about what's going on here. And then the second one was an interview, a canned interview with Dr. Judy Mikovits, which I watched most of. And again, although I was quite shocked at some of the stuff that the doctor claimed. Well, I shouldn't say the doctor, that the scientist claimed. She made a lot of claims that were pretty out there. And so I immediately stopped, because I'm not a virologist. Obviously, I'm a community physician. I'm an emergency physician. I've got a research background in endocrine biochemistry, peptide and steroid biochemistry, from before I went into medicine. So, but I don't know. I'm not a virologist. I've studied a little bit of virology, more than probably most community doctors have, but not as enough to say that I could refute or answer her claims right off the top. So I thought, whoa, I need to back off before I say anything. I need to do some some reading and find out what the people in the virology community have to say about this. So that's what I did, and I found pretty much that the consensus among mainstream scientists is that this is just a horrifying distortion, and the claims that Dr. Mikovits made in her interview, and some of the claims at the beginning of the canned promotional video were they were not just outlandish, they were actually patently false. There's a good article that came out in Science magazine online, and you can track it down at sciencemag.org. There's an article written by two of their journalists there who've been doing science journalism for a long time. One of them is Martin Enserink, and the other is John Cohen. And the byline is or dateline is May 8th. And they put this out, and they answered a number of her claims right off the top, in addition to putting a really nice, concise summary of what the high points of her career. And it's all pretty damning. So once I had seen enough of this stuff, I said, okay, as you know, Q, I don't like to embroil in controversy. I don't debate people in social media. I put out the information that I find in my updates only after I've done a lot of reading to be sure that what I'm saying is representative of the consensus of the medical and scientific community, as far as I can ascertain. Now, obviously, I've got biases too, and as you mentioned earlier, you and I have some areas of, I think, pretty slight disagreement in the vaccine area, but I'm sure there's other things as well. We don't have to agree 100% on everything. We're not the Borg. uh, and discussion of our disagreements and differences of opinion is the crux of the classical liberal model of thought of Western humanism. So we need to be able to do this. But Dr. Mikovits stuff, I didn't feel I could bring anything out on that until I was 100% certain that this stuff was truly bat guano, and so I held off until yesterday before I sent out a couple of Facebook posts detailing that. So that's kind of a long explanation for how we got here.
No, that's fine, and you and I agree on our core values. It seems like core principles. Sure. So it just like most of us Americans, even the people on the far extreme, I think that we agree on more than what we disagree on. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
But unfortunately, we seem to want to put a microscope on the things, not us, but it seems like we as people, we tend to put a microscope on the things that we disagree on, which I really feel is counterproductive to finding any solutions to make things better. Right. Many times we have to start from what we can agree on, and that therefore it kind of humanizes everyone. And it puts people in a place where we realize, okay, I'm not just out to ruin you. I'm out to find a solution to this because we could all agree that this is a problem. I've watched the interview with Dr. Mikovits a few times, and I've also listened to a lot of people refute the video or refute the interview. It's troubling to me, though, that it seems that most of the commentary that I've seen from the opposing side has been against her character or her as a person, impugning her as an individual.
Right.
Which, look, I understand that a lot can be surmised by looking at a person's character. But I think that deeper in this conversation has to be, well, what about the facts that she brings forth?
Absolutely.
What about her arguments? Because that's what I'm interested in. I mean, one of the things that I know, this is getting off topic a little bit, but one of the things that frustrated me so much about the whole Russia thing and the collusion thing, the thing that upset me the most was, okay, we see these emails, we see these things being leaked by WikiLeaks and these documents and things like that. We're reading this information. We know that Hillary Clinton was given questions to the debate before the debate was given. So those things are, I mean, have been proven. So why are we more upset with Russia than we are our own political leaders for putting this information? Either the information is wrong or the information is correct. So why are we upset about information that's true being put out? And I'm not saying that the information she put out is true. I'm just saying we have to, sometimes in the pursuit of finding the truth, we have to be more interested in the proof or what's being said as than we are of who's saying it. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely. I feel exactly the same way. If we start getting bound up in personalities, we get some. We can find ourselves getting into trouble if we can't engage in ad hominem attacks, which unfortunately, a lot of the I agree with you. A lot of the criticism that's come back has just been criticism against Dr. Mikovits personally, which I don't think is productive.
Sure.
No, I mean, but you have to look at the reputation, the professional reputation of the individual when they make a great claim like this, just to put it in some perspective. Um, and that's where I think I have some uh, uh, a lot more concern and reservation than I do about the actual claims of the Plandemic um, concept, because the Plandemic movie comes out of her body of work over the last uh, roughly 10 years, which has been primarily in areas of activism. The thing that people need to understand is that Mikovits has not published anything, has not published, I mean, in terms of peer reviewed papers since 2012. And the last paper, her big paper, was 2009, I believe, 2008, 2009. Okay. The big one that created the big XMRV question, whether we were actually making people sick with a murine or mouse-based virus that had got into vaccines, which had been, and the relationship between the XMRV virus and chronic fatigue syndrome. So this was a pretty big bombshell that she dropped on the scientific world in 2008, and it was. It took about 4 years for the scientific community to vet that paper and get to the point where they could say, no, completely wrong. And this wasn't just a few people saying, we don't like what you did. And to comment on that more, I think what we probably need to talk about more than anything today, at least as far as I'm concerned, it's your podcast, so you can steer it how you like. But from my experience in research science, which granted was a very small, short period of time in my life, about 4 years of my life in graduate school, I I came to an understanding of how the scientific community works, how the research community works, and it's like any other line of business. There are people with power, personalities, and credibility, and the three don't always line up. So if you get a guy like Dr. Gallo, the guy who's credited with identifying the HIV virus and defining it as the pathogen responsible for HIV, he initially called it HTLV3, which is, I remember reading about it at the time and being really excited about that research at the time, because that was actually I was in graduate school shortly after that and worked with some of the people that worked in collaboration. Anyway, Gallo is a real popular guy. He's a really big guy in research. He swings a lot of weight. His labs do a lot of work. They get a lot of funding. And he has to play the political power games to get there. A lot of people don't like the political power games and don't do well in that. And so many of them don't participate. If you're not good in the back room debates, you're not going to do well. Well, there's some truth to that. You have to be able to play the game to a certain degree to be a successful major name in any form of research science. Gallo is one of those people. Anthony Fauci is one of those people. Judy Mikovits, unfortunately, is not one of those people. She wasn't a particularly prominent researcher in her research career. And when she had the disaster of the XMRV virus thing, that really damaged her professionally. Now, she did, to her credit, she retracted the paper. She agreed with the retraction of the paper, but then she backed away from that later and said, no, I never wanted it to be retracted, even though an overwhelming preponderance of evidence showed that the XMRV virus wasn't actually a real virus. It was something that had been created in the lab, and it was nothing that was involved with pathogenic infections of humans at all. And since that time, her career really went into the shitter. And I'm not going to say I don't know the circumstances of it, but career-wise, she's just basically not a very prominent scientist. She's
Sure.
certainly not working as a virologist at the current time, at least in any academic setting that I have been able to discern. So we're talking about a person bringing pretty strong claims against the higher ups in the system, the prominent researchers, Fauci, Gallo, and so forth, making some pretty strong claims about what she was involved in the past, which weren't really very true. I mean, there might have been there's a grain of truth in them, and then coming up now with a theory of this being a planned epidemic. Based on some very sketchy evidence that you really can't back up, or that she doesn't really back up in a way that I feel is credible. So that's kind of the thumbnail sketch of what I'm concerned about here. So
what was your biggest takeaway from the parts that you watched, the interviews that you watched? I mean, again, we're talking about because I'll say for myself, a few things to me stood out. Number one, from a liberty standpoint, the idea that people can hold up research or hold up treatments until they find a way to benefit from those treatments financially, that's a pretty strong claim. That's a very strong claim.
Yeah.
And it immediately, because I want to believe in the goodness of my fellow man, I would say absolutely not. But when you look at these universities, you look at these labs that are being funded greatly with taxpayer dollars, and they are then allowed to double dip by patenting these solutions and then selling them back to the American people, when the American people were really responsible for funding the research in the beginning. That seems like a concern to me.
Yeah, and that's let me speak to that first Q. The degree to which a university funded researcher can financially profit from something they discover is really not as big as people think. I mean, I give you an example. I was involved in a lab back in what year was that? It could have been about 88 through 90. I was in medical school, but I was still doing some research work for a neuroscience lab run by Dr. Sam Weiss at the University of Calgary. And my part was very, very limited. Even though my name is on some of those papers, I really didn't write them. I was not an author. I was just a contributor as a research person who did one small part of it. But my name is on those papers. Okay. And maybe get back to that in a little bit here. It's not really crucial to this point. The point is that Sam and a couple of his grad students came up with some stuff that they were able to patent and sell. But the patent and sale is owned by the university, not by Sam and his grad student. So they can turn around and sell those things, yes, but that money then goes back to the university and not just to the entire university. So it doesn't, that money can't go to help buy new uniforms for the football team. That money has to go back into the research arm of the university. And this is the way most university research collaborations are set up. So, yeah, they were able to make some pretty good money from the sale of this particular technique. It never, I don't think it ever amounted to any kind of a treatment, but it may have led down the road to some treatments that were pretty cool. But they made some money doing that. And what that money did was it went back to the university, to the research arm, to the neuroscience research group at the University of Calgary. And then those research monies became available to the labs participating in that area of research to do more research. Because the thing that you find when you're doing research science is that it's incredibly expensive and money is really hard to come by. So you rely on grants from outfits like the NIH. NIH grants are a huge funder of research worldwide. And everybody who's ever had an NIH grant has really been pleased to get them because it's good, solid money that you can then turn around and you can pay lab techs, you can buy equipment, you can buy uh, outside resources. And that's where this money goes to. So yes, the taxpayer may be funding that research in a large part, but what this does is this gives the universities and the research labs the opportunity to take the fruits of their labor and plow it back into more research. It's if I was to go to Sam Weiss, my former boss, if I went to his house in Calgary, I'm sure he's still living in the same bungalow that he was living in back in 1986 when I first met him. He's not a rich guy. I mean, any spare money he's got goes for skiing and beer. Uh, and that's about it. A great guy. I love Sam. But it's not money that goes to boats and hookers and Las Vegas junkets. It's just not that kind of money. I hope that clarifies it a bit.
No, it does. It clarifies it. But it also goes to one of the other claims that she made was that there's a hierarchy to the research community. Now, again, I'm just parroting what the claims that she made. Okay,
Right.
so
Right.
and you are closer to that community than I am, right? So, but one of the concerns one of the things that concerned me was that there's a hierarchy, and if your research goes against what is the talking point, which it's easy for me to believe because I'm seeing it politically. I'm seeing it. I
Right.
mean, I look at the climate change situation, right? There's some scientists that have come out and they've said, you know what, we're not seeing the same data that you're seeing, and those people have been greatly discredited and shunned. Okay. There's also some doctors that have come out and they've said, you know what, we're not agreeing with the way that we're treating COVID. There's been a lot of doctors that have said, perhaps ventilators might not be the best way to treat some of these people that are under respiratory duress. But when you go against the norm or against the grain, there seems to be consequences there. But I'm curious, how does that advance science? I mean, because any good science should be able to stand against scrutiny, correct?
Sure. And this is a valid criticism of the way research is done. I agree with you. But it's human nature that we tend to respect the people that other people respect. Okay. If you, and I'm not sure if this is a fair analogy, if you talk to all of the NFL quarterbacks who played as starting quarterbacks in the National Football League in the past 30 years and ask them who they respect as the best quarterbacks, they're going to name the same guys. Most of them are going to say, Joe Montana or what's his name, Tom Brady or whomever. they're going to say this guy is the GOAT or this guy isn't. And there's always going to be some guys who did really good work who never got the brass ring. They never made it to the Super Bowl. They just, and you look back in time and realize, and look at some of these things. If you look at the numbers of people like, I can't even think of a name now. There's a great ESPN video I watched a little while ago on some guy who was, we don't ever talk about anymore. Oh, that's who it was. Sonny Jorgensen, going back. Sonny Jorgensen. There's not very many of us who even know that name at this point. I realize I'm dating myself here. But that guy was a phenomenal quarterback. He never won the big one. He never got the cred for being the amazing quarterback he was at the time. Or Joe Kapp, with those fantastic Minnesota Viking teams back in the day.
Oh my God!
I'm really naming myself now, dating myself. But these guys don't get the cred, and so whenever they do an interview on ESPN or any other sports channel, they never call up Joe Kapp and say, "Hey, Joe, what do you think about this?" They call up the guys who have a magnetic personality and they look good on the screen, and they've got a lot of star power. The same thing happens in every field of human endeavor, and that includes research science. So this is where a guy like Fauci is going to make enemies, because he's got some star power. The guy has not only a pretty decent research background, he's also able to, and this is something a lot of people don't understand. Just because he is the guy whose name is last on the list of authors, that's considered the first author, the lead author, or the guy behind the at the head of that particular lab hierarchy. Just because he's the guy who's the lead author on that doesn't mean he did the bench science. Doesn't mean he's necessarily the best bench scientist in that lab or that research group. But he knows how to put together a good research team. Okay. So I don't think any of us would ever say, I'm going to form an NFL team and I want Bill Belichick to be my quarterback. Okay. None of us are going to do that. We know that Belichick cannot throw a football any better than you or I, but we know that Belichick can put together a hell of a team. Anthony Fauci is kind of like the Bill Belichick of research science virology in the United States right now. He is the guy who's been able to put together winning teams year after year after year and produce good results. By the same token, using that same analogy, how many people are going to look, if you go out and do a poll on the street, how many people hate Bill Belichick?
Well, a lot of people would say that Bill Belichick has done his share of cheating.
Yeah.
And some people would probably say something similar about Anthony Fauci. And I'm not arguing that he's not a brilliant individual. I mean, obviously he is very credentialed. So I can't take that away from him. I will say that some of his connections seem a bit suspect, but that in and of itself is not an indictment against him.
Yeah.
But I will say that some of his connections seem to be a bit suspect because those things are coming to the light.
Well, there's no question that a person like Fauci has the power to quash research if he so chooses. He may say that line of research is non-productive. We're not going to fund it. Okay. Or that line of research. Some people, this is seen more in, say, a softer science like archaeology, where it's not actually lab research. There's a lot more opinion involved in it, where people with a great deal of power can quash an entire line of research for decades. The example that comes to mind is the COVID, or not COVID, the Clovis first line of research, which we now know has been discredited. And the Clovis people were not the first hominids in North America by a long shot. But it was that anything that didn't say Clovis first for decades was shut down by the people who ran the journals and people who ran the meetings and so forth. So yeah, Fauci could do that if he was an unscrupulous person, if he was a human person and just felt that his work was being threatened or something like that, he may have quashed research. But it's pretty hard to do that in bench science, in medical research and science research science, because there's so many labs doing work and a little paper can come out almost anywhere at any time that'll blow the lid off any kind of a canned narrative about what is true in medical research science. You can't stamp out every little fire. So the fact that he has been able to stay on top of the game as he has for so many years suggests that he's probably pretty solid most of the time. Nonetheless, yeah, your point and query, absolutely solid. It's possible for people in a hierarchy to put down people who are lower down, and it could be abused. But sometimes it's necessary. You have to say to the researchers who are producing stuff that's just bad, you have to be able to say to them, look, this work isn't good. And you have to be able to say it's not going to continue.
So, what do you feel was the most egregious statement made that you heard by?
Well, there were several. There were several that bothered me, and probably the most outrageous was the idea that the vaccines being produced worldwide have been either deliberately contaminated with viruses that cause human illness, chronic illness, or the contamination was accidental, but there's been an enormous cover up of this. That is such an outrageous statement and flies against the reality of the way research is done. In order for that to be true, there would literally have to be thousands, maybe tens of thousands of scientists in the world who are all in on the conspiracy. And
so I'm going to give you a number here real quick,
yeah.
Dr. Jim.
Okay.
4,027,385,399.60.
Okay. Now you're going to tell me what that number means.
That is the year-to-date number that's been awarded by the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program.
Right.
So if you look at a number, I mean, $4 billion, I know we spend that pretty quickly in our government, right? But I mean, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. So when the layperson looks at a number like that and sees that the pharmaceutical companies, vaccine producers are paying out billions of dollars to families who have been injured by vaccines, and that's awarded. Those are people that have been able to prove injury.
Right.
It's hard to hear a claim by someone like Dr. Makovitz and say, yeah, no, there's nothing burger here. There's nothing. There's no issues with the vaccines that are putting out. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying when you see those numbers, it starts to make you wonder if maybe she's got a point. Your answer to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no question. I mean, you've stated a number; it's a fact, and I'm assuming that you've got the number right, and it's probably an approximation. Regardless, it's a real number.
I gave you all the way down to 60 cents, man.
Yeah, I know. And what was the time on that? Because I think if you add interest and so forth, that number's changing by the.
Oh, I bet you it's probably more than that now.
Yeah, but here's the deal you've got to look at with that. We know that vaccines, and even the most strongly pro-vaccine people, agree. We understand. We accept. Some people get hurt by vaccines. Some people get badly hurt by vaccines. It happens. You and I have talked in private about incidents that we have both seen where someone, in my case, somebody who was a kid who just stopped breathing, seized and stopped breathing, would have died if my then wife and I hadn't done CPR on the kid. Kid came back fine, but he could have been permanently brain injured and he could have been dead from very likely from the vaccine that he'd received that day at age 4 months. These things happen. And when those things happen, people need to be compensated. And this is, I think, not a condemnation of the vaccine program, but I think it's an honorable thing that they've done. They're saying, look, we know that this has happened. We know that you are going to have to deal with this for a lifetime. That's going to cost you some money. Now, you think about some of the injuries that people have, permanent disabilities. $1 million is not a lot of money for somebody to live on for a whole lifetime.
Right.
Doesn't provide much care for somebody who's a total care patient.
Sure.
We're talking about tens of millions of dollars that's required for one person. So if you put it in that context, 4 billion, I suspect that's probably low. That there's more people who need to be tapping into that money. So I mean, that's just, we need to look at that in terms of what what it costs us as a society to use vaccines versus what we lose by using vaccines. What's the cost benefit ratio? And the overwhelming preponderance of evidence suggests that taking the risk of injuring a very small number of people for the benefit of very many people is a valid risk that we're prepared to take. Now, that's not easy to accept when it's your kid who's the one who's been crippled by a vaccine. It's not very easy to accept if you're the person who's dead from a vaccine, if your child is dead or injured. But when we look at the overall benefit, and we can really go down a deep rabbit hole with this one, have we really done, and that rabbit hole goes along the lines of, have we really done the planet any good by preserving more human lives? Um, you know, we could really debate that into some really deep dark holes. But the fact is, we as a society made a decision many years ago, over a century ago, that we were going to be proactive with vaccines, first here in the United States and in Europe, Canada, Australia, Commonwealth countries. And then we've expanded that and expanded that to the point where we are vaccinating all of our kids for many diseases. We're saving some lives, we're saving some brain injuries, but we're also causing a few injuries in the process. I can't personally say that I'm willing to lay my kid on the altar like Abraham and Isaac. I don't know that I can do that, but I do believe that societally the cost benefit ratio is in favor of doing it. But yeah,
Sure.
people get hurt. People get hurt, no question.
You know, and I think that the place we're in a place, I think it's positive. I think that we can focus on the negatives of this COVID situation. There are plenty. Don't
Yeah,
get me wrong. But I think that it's also necessary for us to also focus on the positives of it. And I do think there are some positives. And some of the things that I view as positive, you might not necessarily view as positive. One of the things that I view as positive is I feel that people will do a better job of holding those in power accountable, right?
right.
And I think people are educating themselves on how much of our daily lives are being controlled by bureaucrats. Okay,
Right.
and is it proper, or does it make sense for us to give that much power to those people? You know, we have scientists that are telling us that we need to trust the CDC, that we need to trust the WHO. We just need to shut up and whatever they tell us, accept it as gospel truth. Well, you and I have had this conversation previously on other shows. Um, the CDC and the WHO have made some gaffes. They have made some, and I feel that they have
Yeah.
made some gaffes that have cost a lot of lives. Okay. That doesn't mean that they're perfect. And I'm also not going to sit here and say that they're all wrong. But they've made some gaffes. So they're not above making mistakes, especially very costly mistakes.
Right.
So we can agree on the fact that, you know, we are looking for perfect results from imperfect people.
Yeah.
But we can't just accept anymore that because it came from the WHO, because it came from the CDC, because it came from Dr. Fauci, that we can accept it and take it to the bank. We're past that, I feel, at this point.
Well,
Um,
we should have been past that before. I mean,
well,
I agree with you 100%. We can't. They need to be accountable. They do. I mean, the CDC and the FDA, I think, made a horrible mistake by putting the COVID testing, uh, acute disease test, in the hands of the CDC alone instead of turning it out to all of the licensed private labs in the United States. There could have been 10,000 labs working on that instead of one lab. And the delay from that was a delay of about 6 weeks. That really cost us a lot. It cost us a lot. Now, in terms of how many lives, I couldn't put a number on that yet. But what CDC does better than anybody is track those lives and track those numbers. So I'm confident, even though CDC screwed up on that lab on that one side, I'm confident that on the other arm, their accounting for the illness is going to be good. And
well, wait a minute now. Didn't they just overestimate by about 30 some odd thousand lives?
Well, no, they didn't actually. If you read through to the bottom of the monograph, they point out we can confirm 37,000 and some deaths, but based on what we know about monitoring epidemics, we're guessing it's going to be about 64,000. That was just a projection. So they did a pretty. I think they're doing a good job. But remember, they don't give out your final flu vaccine or flu season numbers until until May every year, well after the flu season is over. So, for asking them to come up with hard numbers now when we're still in the midst of the epidemic, it's unfair and it's unwarranted. So, yeah, a lot of people got their panties in a twist over that one, and including me when I first read it. And then some cooler heads told me, "Doc, go back and read the whole page." I said, "What? Why read to the bottom of the page, man? I'm just going to read the headline and go ballistic."
Well, I mean,
so, yeah, I got to play too. A lot of us went off half-cocked on that one.
So you mentioned the discrediting or her attempt to discredit the vaccine program. Was an issue for you. You said there were a few of them. What would the next one be?
That would be, to be honest, if I go past that, I've got to go back into my notes here and see what I've got.
Well, while you're looking at that, we got a couple super chats we need to get through real quick.
Okay.
All right. Let me pull up my Streamlabs thing here quick because my phone locked itself.
Technology. That never happens.
I know, right? All right, first up, we have Bob Neiman with $2. Thank you, buddy. And though his super chat was retracted by Google, Streamlabs has a copy of the text. Awesome. And he says, "Give me them cheeks." I hope he's talking about our jowls.
Yeah. Well, Soder, you can keep your fuzz on your face to hide yours, but I had to shave for my N95, so I plead a victim of razors.
I tell you what. Now
I can't tell you how many people I've seen with face masks and beards in the area. It's troubling.
Well, I'm going to say this. I was incredibly outraged when I started hearing the scientific community and our healthcare professionals insinuating that the average American could not properly wear a mask. I thought, these people, this is absurd. This is wrong. How could you discredit the American people and our basic intelligence to say that we could not properly put a mask on? And the more I am out in the public, oh my God, right? People cannot. I mean, I've watched people put their mask on and keep their nose out of it, right? And then I watch people lift their mask up, eat a piece of burger or eat a burger with their gloves on that they just used to hand cash to the cashier, and then put their mask down and chew. It's absurd. I let's just say it hasn't renewed my faith in the intelligence of those around me, but I digress. Sorry, but I had to air that out a little bit. So, all right, Soder, sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay. And up next, also Bob Neiman with $2 because apparently he felt bad about his first one. He says he likes the stream.
Well, thank you, Bob. We appreciate that. All right. Is that's everybody? We're
That's it. That's everything that we've gotten so far.
All right. So Soder, let me ask you while the good doctor is going through. I don't want to. You and I were talking in the beginning, and you said you approached this thing with is unbiased of a
Tried
of an
to.
approach as possible, or attempted to, even though your wife has some very strong opinions about it, even though the media and social media seem to have some very strong opinions about it. After watching, how did you come away from it?
I came away from it like I'm not sure what exactly is so damning about this thing that it has to be shut up. Like it to me it comes across as kind of your typical conspiracy theorist tinfoil hat type of thing, and that just from it coming out right now, everyone is freaking out about it in terms of, oh, you're an idiot if you believe it. Otherwise, and we have to shut you up because this is a terrible time for something like this to come out. But if it had come out, mid last year, it would have just been ignored, right?
Yeah.
Besides that, there was one thing that the gal said that kind of just triggered something in my head that goes, something's off here. And that was when she said, you don't die with a virus, you die because of a virus.
Or from a virus, yeah.
So it's like, but you kind of just got done telling us that coronavirus is everywhere and you can get it from animals, but you won't get sick. And that people have viruses floating around in them all the time without a problem, or a significant problem anyway. So it's like, so if I died in a car accident, of course I would die with a virus. Like, this is kind of picking apart the language, and I kind of get what you're saying, but at the same time, this thing that you're saying, it's a good soundbite, but people are going to take this wrong. And the way you've constructed this whole video is to try to make yourself sound really smart, and this makes you sound really stupid. Why is this in here? So yeah, it's just, I don't know. I can see how some of her stuff comes across as, oh my gosh, I'm this poor person. Look, I've been maligned by the authorities and I've been put in jail, and they never actually charged me, and that helps her cause of something going wrong. But at the same time, I have to look at those kind of situations in the eye of the moment. Well, yeah, you did take a bunch of proprietary information. Of course,
Allegedly.
You're going to fit allegedly. So we have to deal with that right then. We can't look at it, however many years later and go, oh, they totally overreacted or not. But they have to operate under information at the time.
But she wasn't charged, in all fairness, and so.
Well, they dropped the charges. Like, she was charged, but they went away for whatever. I don't know what the reason was.
We're innocent until proven guilty. She wasn't proven guilty, so.
So yeah, well, she is innocent in that she hasn't been convicted, but
then we can stop. That's all that needs to be said. She is innocent because she has not been proven guilty. Then the conversation stops there.
But her statement of without charges is false because she was charged.
Okay, but without conviction. Okay.
Without conviction. But we lock people up all the time without conviction. So we have to just say I was locked up without any charges is false. She was charged and she was locked up for some, I don't know what everything that surrounded it, but like without more information from her or someone saying, well, yeah, this is a felony offense or wherever she was. It's like, I can't, take that and put it in a bucket that says, okay, she's got something here without ignoring the rest of reality.
Fair enough. So good doctor, I see you're in agreement with some of that.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, the thing that you have to think about here is I agree with with what Soder was saying, and I'm just trying to go back here. I was talking about this with with the chief deputy in my in the county where I'm the local health authority here in West Texas. We're down there in West Texas. I'm up in Nebraska today. Dang, it's cold up here, man. I'm used to 80-degree days, and here I'm in my hotel room with a long sleeve T-shirt and a sweater, and I'm just barely warm. But yeah, she was charged, and the chief deputy was asking me about this. He was one of the first people to call me, and he doesn't. He's a no nonsense guy. He's kind of a black or white kind of guy, and with some intelligence behind it. You got to add the second part to that for many people. But what he did was he said, so she was charged. What was she charged with? And I said, well, she was charged with stealing lab notebooks, hard drives, thumb drives, and basically doing a Hillary Clinton, doing business on her personal email, which meant that she had proprietary information. They dropped those charges, I said, and he said, well, of course, if you told me, he said, and this is in Reno, Nevada that this occurred. He said, if I was the supervising cop or supervising, my current job, chief deputy, and my guy said, okay, well, we've just arrested this scientist for stealing a bunch of notebooks and proprietary information. He said, I would say, okay, how are we going to prove that? And the one guy I talked to would look at the other guy and said, how do you want to prove that? He said, I don't know how to prove that. And so they would both go to, he said, I go to the DA and say, I don't think we can prove these charges because we don't even understand what's going on. The complexity of the theft is not something that most lay people would be able to even understand, let alone make a case in court how important that was. And in addition to that, you have to look at, she'd been fired by that company, WPI, which is a private research institute. She had already been fired. They were suing her for unnamed, at least to my mind. I don't know what the lawsuit specified for. And then they had her charged the criminal charges. So I think basically they decided, look, we've already taken away her job and her income. We're already fighting her in the civil court to get the stuff we really want back. This is just petty. Let's just drop the criminal charges. That's my guess. And, I think it's kind of a shameful thing that it came down to that. A bunch of people behaving badly is what it sounds like to me.
Perhaps, but if we are going to hold fast to the thing that one of the things that makes us great as a nation, then we must say that she was not found guilty.
Exactly.
There's due process.
It's a non-issue,
and they did not prove it. So therefore, to further malign her would not be correct. Now, your statements earlier in regards to the scientific evidence that she brought forth and finding that was false or discredited, that's fair. That's fair because if her research was shoddy, then yeah, you can judge her on that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, but you were looking at your notes. So number one being her vilification of our national vaccine program. The next issue, the next major issue you had with the interview was what?
Her allegation that the NIAI had distributed. Where is it now? She actually gave a number, millions, if not billions of dollars that had been given in a cover-up or in a series of cover-ups. That is such a huge allegation to say that the funds of a national funding organization have been perverted and used as hush money. Boy, that is something you would really have to be able to find some evidence to prove. It would be very hard for the NIAI, did I say that right? National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Disease, NIAID, got the D, For NIAID not to have watchdogs on that would, first of all, be highly irregular. There are watchdogs. There's checks and balances on where those monies go. Dr. Fauci cannot dispense a check. He can't disperse a check to somebody for research and have that money not be accounted for. The laboratory that gets that money has to take that money and they have to provide an accounting back to NIAID to say, here's where we spent it. And it went to lab tech salaries. It went to a portion of the principal investigator's salary. It went to all of these things. There's accounting that goes back to it. So the idea is, the concept of, you remember from back in the 70s, was slush fund. That people, a fund of money that was neither hard nor soft. It was neither liquid water nor frozen ice. It was just slush. And
I agree. I agree with you that using money as hush money could be easily sniffed out. What would be harder to be sniffed out would be withholding funding from people who are attempting to discredit or prove something that you do not want.
Bingo.
Study,
It would be very hard to withhold money. An example of that is that the pressure from the American government on NIH to cancel the Wuhan laboratories research grant, which is a 6-year-old grant. It's been running for 6 years. I don't know what the duration is. It's probably a 10-year grant, to just cut it off because there's so much pressure coming against NIH to do so from our government. Research communities up in arms over this. You don't just cancel people's research grants without facing repercussions from the research community at large. So Mikovits's allegation that billions of dollars are being used as hush money is just beyond ridiculous. It could not be done without a lot of people knowing about it. It just couldn't happen. I mean, as I said, if you go to Anthony Fauci's house wherever he lives, I'd be very surprised if you found him living in a Georgetown mansion. And if you did, I'm pretty sure that the money would have come from marrying a rich gal and inheriting her money, rather than money that he has gained as a salaried position with any academic institution. There's just not enough money in it for people to do.
Perhaps not, but I mean, but sitting on several boards that he sits on could possibly help, including sitting on a, well, anyway, we don't have to go into that.
But you know what I'm trying to say. The guy didn't get into this to get rich, and I don't think you're going to find evidence that he has. I don't think anybody's found any evidence. I'd be very surprised to see it. And if there was an investigation that showed that he had been misappropriating funds, I'd want him out on his ass.
I mean, I would imagine that sitting on the leadership council of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has to be a fairly lucrative endeavor, would it not?
I don't know. I'm not on. The only thing that I'm sitting on is as a local health authority in a little county in West Texas. Doesn't pay much. If people, I hear that people make money doing that kind of stuff, and I hear Bill Gates has a few spare dollars lying around. So
a few,
yeah, could be. It could be.
Yeah, it's he'll make it through the winter anyway.
Yeah.
So, and so, but in talking about that, the billions of dollars, I would agree. I mean, her, in all fairness, just to be fair to her claims are that the notebooks were hers, and that the work technically, so the notes and the notebooks belong to her, but I understand that the research, because she was being paid by a lab, that research, even though she was conducting it, belonged to her employers. So exactly. I get that.
Exactly.
My understanding is she also believed that they wanted her notes to destroy them because they proved her claim. Well, I can understand the conundrum there, right? If you truly feel, and I'm not saying it was or not, because that's not what we're here to do. We're just here to put some information out there. People can do their own research.
Yeah.
and they can come to their own conclusion. I'm not here to tell anybody what to believe, but if I honestly, and you being a principled individual that I know you are, if you were seeing some evidence that was, wow, it was damning, and you felt that there's something that's being said here that that disproves what we're being told. If you felt that you had come across some evidence that discredited what was being taught and was costing lives, and you knew that the people who were asking for that research were going to bury it, I'm assuming that would be a tough decision to make, to turn that over to people who wanted to destroy that information. Now,
Well,
I'm
yeah.
not saying that it's right. I'm not saying that she was correct in that, but I can also see from her side that if her research was going to be discredited by, well, not discredited, but being burned and destroyed or buried, it'll be hard to turn that research over.
Yeah, if you have to almost wear blinkers to follow to it's such a narrow argument. You have to look at it in the broader context of how research is done. You know, when the first thing is, yes, the intellectual property of that research belongs to your employer in those circumstances. Okay, just like when I wrote up my research as a graduate student, as a master's thesis, um, which was kind of a sideways track for me because I was headed toward a PhD program in a year or two, and I decided no, I'll go to medical school instead, and because I got to tell you, I didn't go on in research because I didn't find it interesting. I didn't go on in research because I thought medicine was a better, uh, a more lucrative profession. It might be, but I didn't go on and research for the primary reason that once I started spending time with a lot of bright researchers, I realized that I didn't have the kind of bright mind that was needed to be a really first rate researcher.
Hmm.
I just wasn't smart enough. And I saw other people around me who were hell bent on getting their PhD and advancing their own labs, who, in my estimation, weren't as smart as I was, but they weren't honest with themselves and what the aims of science must be. This is my opinion. And so they decided they were going to go on and pursue a career in this. And the danger of that was they were putting all their eggs into this basket it's a very long road to get to the point of being a principal investigator. And if you fail, if your research isn't good enough to make you the kind of reputation you need to get a lab, your all of that work, all that time is pretty much done. So I got out of research because I recognized what a beautiful thing it was and how I was just not suited to doing that kind of work.
Hmm.
Other people like Dr. Mikovits, her career smacks of the same kind of thing as these people I'm describing to you. They're bright, but they're not shining stars. And she might have been able to establish a small lab in a small university and make, a good living and make a nice contribution, but she was never going to be a Dr. Gallo or a Dr. Fauci. She was never going to be in that league. So, so here's a person now who's been shunted off she's out of the academic career by the time she went to work for WPI. She's out of the academic stream. She's into private research now. Private research has some very bright people in it, and some of them are very well compensated, I might add. But you're in a realm now where it's not academic. Shall I say it's junior varsity? So if that's a way to frame it. And then she takes her work, which is now wholly owned by them. Just like my work as a grad student was wholly owned by my principal investigator and by the university. Okay. I have my notebooks, but my results, all of my files, everything that I had actually done stayed with the lab. It stayed with Dr. Rorstad and his lab because that was their property, not mine. Now, if I had found something that my principal investigator didn't like, he thought it contradicted his research, and if he was petty enough to stop my research for it, I would have been able to talk to other people. And there were times, as graduate students, you get around and have a beer after work, and you start trashing your supervisors. That's just it's one of the traditions of grad school. You just trash your supervisor. What an idiot my guy is. You think your guy's an idiot? I'll tell him what an idiot my guy is, and so on. But when I would come up with something, say, my guy, he's completely crazy. Look, he thinks this, that, and the other thing, but I can prove this. And one of the other grad students would look at me and slap me upside the head and say, "You idiot! Look, you failed to correct for that." And I go, "Oh yeah, right, okay." Put me back in my place, and then I go back and go, "Oh well, maybe Dr. Rorstad's not such an idiot after all." And he certainly wasn't. He was a very bright man, and I respect him enormously. Nonetheless, when you're doing research, if you're finding stuff that you think is really crucial, you don't keep it to yourself. You talk to your colleagues. You go to meetings. You say, "You know what? I'm finding this." And people say, "Oh, that's very interesting. Well, I found something that might be related to that. I'm going to go back to my lab and I'm going to try out what you just did." And so you're not going to find all of the key to the fountain of youth is not going to be in one notebook in one lab. A whole bunch of people are going to have pieces of it because we all talk to each other.
Right.
Oh, so again, I want to just put the larger context on that. She couldn't have had at WPI, she couldn't have had the key to the universe. She might have found a piece of it, but she would have shared it with other people. And in her lines of investigation, she would have had to collaborate with other labs on some parts of it. There would be other people who would know about it. And if WPI said, "You know what, we're just going to shut this whole thing down," too late. It's already out. It's already, quote unquote, viral.
Hmm. Well,
Ideas infect beautifully, and they spread.
So I mean, we're talking about a lot of money
Yeah.
involved in this, and essentially, I think the problem people have is we are trusting scientists to be concerned wholly with our health, right?
Yeah.
While at the same time, we have pharmaceutical companies that these scientists then work for that are worth billions of dollars that are profiting while using us as the consumer as guinea pigs, right? So people are standing up, and I feel that people are watching this, and they're saying, "Wait a minute, we're the ones that these tests are being run on," and we've all seen these drugs that have been released and these procedures that have been approved by the FDA, only to find out that that 6 years later, have you or someone you love been affected by um, and again, like you mentioned, if it's your kid that's affected by the side effects, it hits a little different. If you're the one that died as a result of these side effects, it hits a little different. So you can understand why people are asking questions,
Oh,
because
sure.
they realize that this circle of because we take comfort in feeling that, oh, there's thousands and thousands of people that are all checks and balances that are watching this and watching that. But then when you continue to come around to one or two names at the top, the Dr. Fauci's, the Gallows, and yeah, we have this large underling base, but when it gets up to the top, it bottlenecks pretty quickly, doesn't it?
Well, if all of the findings had to come through those few heads at the top, that would be a bad thing. But the fact is that all the information leaks out from the entire structure at all the levels. There's people working in little old labs at University of Calgary, like I was, who never we might go to a conference once in our lifetime where Dr. Fauci or Dr. Gallo would be a speaker, and we might see him at the front of the auditorium during the keynote address, and that would be the closest we'd ever get to that guy. But the work that I did in again, back to Sam Weiss's lab at University of Calgary, the work that we did that helped with multiple sclerosis research, and that my fellow grad student Brent worked on, that he made a patent on, and actually I think he's actually running his own lab now based on that patent. That stuff leaked out without Gallo or Fauci ever hearing anything about it, without any of the high end people knowing anything about it. This is This is the beauty of the way our research community works. We talk to each other horizontally as well as vertically.
Yeah, and I'm not part of that, and that's why you're here, to bring a little bit of understanding and levity to the situation. Um, there's a lot of money involved, and of course, they say you chase the dollars, you chase the money, you
Right.
track the money, and you see the issues. One of the
Yeah.
things that I'm seeing right now that have caused me some concern is, the hydrochloroquine thing versus the remdesivir. And you
Right.
look at the vicious attacks that we're seeing, by the media and by the even I even say Dr. Fauci. I mean, because we've had this discussion as well. It's anecdotal at best. Well, no, it's not. It's not anecdotal.
Mm.
But why are we seeing such a strong push when we've seen very strong evidence to the contrary in some parts of Italy, in France, in Germany? We're seeing very promising numbers in those areas, right? Um, well, with the hydrochloroquine, when coupled along with the zinc or the Z-Pack, we're seeing very promising numbers. But here, they're pushing remdesivir. Now, the problem is that remdesivir is much more costly drug, much more costly drug. But that's what's being pushed, and it does make you wonder if is there pressure there to push that over pushing the cheaper treatment? I
Well,
mean,
there is. There's financial pressure. And just to make a brief comment here, and this is an aside out of nowhere. I just got a pop up on my computer. Little Richard died today, 87
yeah,
years of age. Oh man, I love that guy. His music was amazing.
you know what? And this is going to sound terrible, and God rest his soul. But the one, this is awful, and I might get kicked off of Facebook or off of YouTube for this. But the thing that I read the article that came out as it came across my feed, and the thing that stuck out, the biggest thing to me was that his son um, is the one that confirmed his death, and I'm thinking, Little Richie had a son, like.
Oh yeah. Hey, listen, we're way down the wrong road here, but listen, I know a guy who played for Little Richard, was a guitar
Okay.
player, you know, and Richard did love the ladies. I'll just leave it at that. But
You know what? And that's a major surprise to me.
well, you could also point at if you want to take it down that a little bit of a comparison, your fellow Minnesotan, the musician formerly known as Prince,
Yes.
pretty girly looking guy, but he made heavy play in the ladies.
I tell you what, and it's funny. We're getting off on a little bit of a of a rabbit trail.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to say this in the beginning because I wanted people to actually give you the credit that you deserve for your brilliance, and not to look down upon you for being a John Mayer fan. Yeah.
All right, let's just let that rabbit trail go. Let's get back to hydroxychloroquine and remdesivir. I was really hopeful about hydroxychloroquine in the early days of this pandemic. And there's still some questions unanswered, but it does not appear that the more robust research that's been coming out of those initial promising reports has not been encouraging. It has not been as effective as people thought it might be. And then, in addition to that, there is the absolutely clear evidence that the hydrochloroquine plus azithromycin greatly increases the risk of lethal heart arrhythmias. So it is dangerous. Now, at what point do you say this is enough to say it's dangerous to even trial it? I don't have those numbers, but it was the study that came out of South America that I read a couple of weeks ago. I just read an abstract. I didn't read the whole study, wasn't published yet, but it did show some very severe increases in the death rate in hydroxychloroquine plus azithromycin farm. So there is a downside to that story. We don't have the final answer yet, but it's definitely out there. As for remdesivir,
and in all fairness, that is hydrochloroquine over a long period of time, correct?
they were not talking about a long period of time. They were talking about a 30-day study, and they had an increase in deaths within that 30-day period. So
Okay.
that really shook me up, and I haven't had I haven't got a strong enough handle on it yet to revisit that on my updates. But we will revisit that soon. As for remdesivir, I don't have. It's hard to separate the wheat from the chaff. The study being done at the University of Chicago, which is a level 4 trial at best, has been it's paid for by Gilead. The initial reports sounded a lot rosier than the follow-up reports have been, and it's a very expensive drug. And I want to remind you about a drug that came out back in 08, I believe, called Tamiflu. Still prescribed widely today by people who work in doc in a box kind of settings. Soccer mom comes in and says, "My kid's sick." You do a flu test. The kid has influenza A. Mom says, "I want a prescription for Tamiflu and I want it now." I won't call her Karen, but you know who I'm talking about. Says, "I want that Tamiflu right now." So you say, "Okay," you're not going to argue with her. You write out a prescription for Tamiflu, and you tell her, "Look,
I'm not going to argue with the Karen.
Sorry, Soda, I think I hurt you."
No, I'm laughing. It's hilarious.
What a shame. I know some beautiful ladies named Karen, and they're but the whole problem with it is that Tamiflu, even at the beginning, when the first monographs came out, they said, "Look, it will reduce the duration of symptoms from 12 days to 11 days." That was the only proven benefit that they could quantify. It reduced severity of symptoms, but that's a qualitative measure, not a quantitative measure. And by the way, we're going to charge you $180 for the prescription. That's what it's going to cost you to take a drug that'll make you sick 1 day less. Remdesivir is starting to look like a drug in the same class as Tamiflu. It looks like it doesn't have that much of a benefit. Now, we still don't have all the numbers in yet. I'm hoping to be pleasantly surprised to find one that actually does work really well on COVID-19, and two, that it doesn't cost as much as some of the people are saying it's going to cost. The problem is you just don't know what these things are going to cost until they actually start selling it.
Well, the Institute for Clinical Economic Review, or the ICER, they are saying that the fair cost of the remdesivir treatment would be $4,460 per patient.
Well, I think that's inflated based on the current cost of the drug as opposed to production costs. That's also IV drug versus oral medication, I believe.
Well, Gilead is saying that it could actually treat for $1,000 per patient. So Gilead is saying that they could actually treat for $1,000, but it's been approved, which, in the insurance community, for up to $4,460 per patient would be considered reasonable and customary, I guess.
Right. Okay.
But Gilead is saying that they could treat for $1,000 per patient. But of course, looking at that up against, hydrochloroquine, where you're looking at $63 per dose, 63 cents per dose.
Exactly.
I mean, that's quite a quite a sizable difference between the two treatments.
Yeah,
and the
it
cost
is.
of the two treatments.
Yeah, and there's no question we have to think about the cost of these things. Um, you cannot take $1,000 per treatment regimen and drop that down in Zimbabwe and expect them to be able to benefit from it. We're looking for an answer that will work in the whole world, not just at the Mayo Clinic.
Sure.
Yeah. So a lot of reason to be less than hopeful over the antiviral treatments at this point, I'm sorry to say.
Well, Doc, I have had a fantastic time visiting with you, as we always do. I know you are up against a pretty tight window. Got to get to work, and so I don't want to keep you much longer. Any more takeaways that you can leave us with from the interview, the Plandemic interview?
Well, just one more thing, and I thought I'd leave this bombshell for the last. And here's my own conspiracy theory. I noticed, I don't know if you can call it conspiracy theory, but it's an interesting association. There was a wire story that came out in a couple of different online newspapers earlier in the week, Monday, Tuesday, something like that, that stated that the NSA and who else was it? Was it NSA and FBI? I think were saying that they had uncovered significant evidence of significant misinformation campaigns coming out of foreign countries, and specifically named Iran and China as sources of these misinformation campaigns. Now, I haven't been able to find the story since, so I'm beginning to wonder whether I dreamed it. But I do recall coming across it twice in the same day. And that was just about the time that the Plandemic thing hit the airwaves. I couldn't help but notice that that Dr. Mikovits has been around for a long time, peddling the same bill of goods, but hasn't really made much of a splash. But suddenly, it's making a big splash. And the question that occurred to me right away was, who's paying for this to come up right now? Is this something that's coming from is it grassroots? Is it something that's growing here in America? Or is this something that's being paid for by a foreign power that wants to make people upset? I don't know.
She had some pretty damning things to say about the Chinese and the Wuhan University.
Yeah.
So I'm not.
That's just to get us off the scent.
Yeah, I don't think we want to put any more eggs in that basket than we have to. I just have to say, look, if somebody who's been saying something for a long time and getting no traction is suddenly getting traction, and we know that money is being poured into these kinds of efforts, is there a correlation? I don't know, but we may find out in the next few weeks.
Sounds like a lot of Russian collusion talk to me.
It sure does, doesn't it?
Well, hey, Doc, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us. As always, nothing but the utmost respect for you. And I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. It's something that's important. I know a lot of people have a lot of passionate thoughts about all this going on. And so it's important to at least get some truth out there for people to kind of at least put them on the right trail so that they can research it for themselves. So thank you for that. Once again, for all of you mothers out there, thank you so much for joining us. Happy Mother's Day to you. Be sure to let your bride know, if she's not watching, that I wished her and Soder wishes her a very happy Mother's Day. So
I certainly will, guys. Thank you.
Yep.
And Soder, for Diet Soder, make sure she knows that we wish her a happy Mother's Day as well. All right.
Diet Soder. She loves Diet Dr. Pepper Soder. You just know that. Well, it's been a true pleasure. Again, I just want people to understand that the main thing in this whole deal is let's just be kind to one another. Try and treat your everybody like you want to be treated yourself. That's really all you need to do.
Well, I agree 100%. So at the end of the day, I think we all want to get to the bottom of this. We want to figure out how to get out of it so that we can beat it. And I think we will all emerge as better people and a better country as a result. So
I agree.
we all want the same thing. So, hey, you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Enjoy your enjoy the rest of your day, even though you're not going to have as much fun as the rest of us. I'm going to go do some yard work. Soder's going to do some yard work, and you're going to go and freeze inside the hospital, I guess.
The ER, you got it.
All right.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much,
Thanks
Doc.
for coming on.
See you next time.
We'll see you next time.
Good day, everyone.